There might not be a more talented D tackle in this draft, though, than our consensus number one guy, and that is, of course, Mason Graham from Michigan. Dolan, what makes Mason Graham one of the best D tackle prospects in recent memory?
I mean, it feels like it's like when we talked about Abdul Carter in the Edge episode. So just take all of the good things that we said about almost any of these other guys and just throw it in one, right? Because you're talking about if he plays, he weighed in at 296 at the combine. Supposedly, I believe, weighed in at 305 or 306 at his pro day. Mm-hmm. And you were telling me he played at 315.
That's what source close to him told me he played at 315.
If he moves the way he moved on tape at 315, I don't think he should get by number 5 at Jacksonville. That's how good I think this guy is. Insanely quick hands, insanely quick feet for this size. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's a level of athlete where it's not, we've talked about all these guys, 3 tech, 1 tech, it's not. Mason Graham, you could play the game on tape when you're watching the end zone. Find Mason Graham because he could be anywhere across the defensive line. We've seen him produce standing up off the edge and looping back inside in a 2-point stance, and I'm just like, what? None of it makes any sense. He's an absolute grinder. His eyes are on the football at all times. He's relentless. He's trying to get there. Look, shorter arms, yes. 315, a little bit lighter for some of the roles he plays, but that's why he had Kenneth Grant next to him to be the best complement you could in college football. I think that's really it. It's the length for me that's going to be the one issue of like, okay, trying to shed blocks head up, a little bit of a thing. He's got shorter arms. Sometimes with the tackling, you can see when tackling NFL backs, the length might be a thing, but I don't think that's going to hurt him that often considering how many plays he's going to be able to make. I'm still in the boat. He's one of the 4 best football players in this draft. I think he's that good. I think you're talking about Hunter, Carter, Ginty, and Graham to me. In some order, are the 4 best football players in this draft. He can do anything for you. There's been comps thrown out there. I know Christian Wilkins has been a comp that's been thrown out there a lot with him. Maybe a little bit shorter arm, a little bit shorter guy, but the way that he moves at that size and the plays that he made, the 2-dimensional way that he makes plays, run game and as a pass rusher, and the things you can do with him. I mean, think about what the Chiefs do with Chris Jones in obvious passing situations. Just put him wherever they want to find the one-on-one matchup. Michigan did that with Mason Graham. If they felt like the left tackle was the team's biggest problem, let's go. Put Mason on him. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who can get on 2 feet and execute stunts and things like that. Wink Martindale spent a whole year just experimenting with him in Ann Arbor. He's a ridiculous talent. And we actually also, your take on this, because here was mine. We got a question in the chat last week on the NFL show with Trevor about, is Mason Graham, was he only like able to do all the things he could and he was just kind of like, because Kenneth Grant was next to him taking up all the blockers? And I go, I mean, he's still that good, but also that's what you want.
Yeah.
Sure. Fine. That's the type of guy I would love to have next to him. Absolutely. Is a guy like Kenneth Grant who's going to eat the space and
they helped each other out.
Allow Graham, whatever you can do to have, that's complementary football is what that is. Get the double teams off Mason because you know what he can do one-on-one. He's a freak. That's where I'm at. I think he's one of the 4 best football players in this draft. I could argue the safest pick in this draft. There's a couple other guys in that group that are pretty good. I'll say it. I'll say it for the next month. We're a month away from the draft. If Travis Hunter's not on the board, Jacksonville should take Mason Graham number 5 overall.
Yeah.
Any other pick?
That's your top 2 players for them.
That's literally it's Travis Hunter, it's Mason Graham. Anybody else there with one of those 2 on the board?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here. That's where I would be for the Jaguars. I just let us have Mason Graham and we're running.
I feel like his ceiling is Jacksonville at 5. And what do you think his floor is? Carolina at 8?
I think, again, people with the short arms thing, if I was going with an absolute stupidly low ceiling, although there's a little bit of trauma that comes with it, Dallas at 12. I think San Fran would take him at 11.
Yeah.
If he's sitting there, that value's sitting there at 11, they need a player like that, sure. I mean, how many teams? I just can't imagine him falling, even if he got past 5. I can't imagine him falling very far. Even Saints at 9.
No.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, they need help with the tackle.
I would sit the Jets.
Yeah.
I mean, put him next to Quinnen. Watch what happens. I know the offense has been the talk of the town, but if Mason Graham's sitting there, I'd have a hard time not taking him if I'm Aaron Glenn.
Yeah. I would too, man. I think Mason Graham, obviously, he's been just a phenomenal football player his entire career. An 80 PFF grade as a true freshman, and then 90-plus PFF grades in his sophomore and junior years. His 92.5 career grade leads all D tackles in the country over the last 3 years. dominant as both a pass rusher and as a run defender. Again, he had the highest run defense grade in the nation this past year. An explosive first step with excellent bend and violent hands and a motor that does not quit as well. Now, the one negative that I can even find with him, his 32-inch arms, like you mentioned, Dolan, are 10th percentile for defensive tackles. So sometimes a little bit tougher for him to disengage from blocks, and it leaves his chest exposed a little bit, but doesn't really affect him that much, right? If he's still producing at a 90-plus PFF grade level in each of the last 2 years. I think this guy is in the same vein as a Quinnen Williams, as a Jalen Carter, as the best D-tackle prospects we've seen in the last 5 or so years, because I think he's that good of a player. Arguably the highest floor of any player in this class, and I think he's worthy of a top 5 pick. Ideal fit as a 3-tech and a 4-3 defense, but like you said, he could play anywhere, honestly, on a defensive line as well. And I think Jacksonville at 5, with the new GM, James Gladstone, there's actually a question asked of him by a reporter saying, hey, you guys need D-tackles. You didn't sign any D-tackles in free agency. Like, what gives with that? And he goes, well, you need some roster spots for D-tackles for rookies as well. So, we have a lot of draft picks. And I think that was kind of a wink, like, hey, that guy, number 55, that wears maize and blue, we're a big fan of that guy. He might be wearing the teal in Jacksonville pretty soon. So I think that was kind of a little head nod to the camera, like, hey, we might be looking at Mason Graham.
You're coming from the team of Aaron Donald, remember?
Yeah,
right. And I'm not saying nobody's Aaron Donald. He might be the greatest defensive tackle ever, but the impact that sort of guy can have is ridiculous. And I think sometimes, look, we talk about the overthinking bit of this. For 2 years, maybe all 3, but let's say for the last 2 years, we have watched Mason Graham be, no doubt, the best defensive tackle in college football.
Yep.
Without question.
Yep.
I don't have any other arguments. I don't have anybody else.
He won that Rose Bowl game by himself.
Oh, the Alabama game?
Yeah.
And it's funny because in that game, I don't know that he had more than maybe 1 or maybe 2 pressures. Mm-hmm. That was the run defense in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, they stood no chance in run defense.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're talking about I don't think a player we have to overthink that much.
No, I think, I thought Jalen Carter was a top 2 or 3 prospect in the draft. I thought Quinnen Williams was a top 3 prospect in that draft. I think Mason Graham is on that level as well.
It's a guy who changes your defense. If he gets by Jacksonville, I would be shocked.
Yeah.
The Jets would heavily consider him. The Panthers, I'll tell you what, you talk about complimentary and what we just talked about with him and Grant. Mason Graham and Derek Brown, you couldn't do much better than that.
Even Chicago at 10, right?
It would, yeah.
I honestly, it's almost like any team at that point is like, dude,
anybody. This is somebody, and this is where you get the elite prospects. When we talk about Hunter, Carter, Graham, Ginty, maybe McMillan, like you're talking about guys. We've talked about so many guys who are scheme fits and system guys.
At a certain point, team need does not matter. It's like, dude, this guy's way too good of a player.
Team need doesn't matter. Scheme doesn't matter. Get him in there.
Yeah.
Put him on the field. Put his friggin' helmet on, and he's going to do something right for you. So, no, Graham, just a fantastic football player. And, again, no question, over the last 2 years, best D-tackle in college football. It's not even close.
Dominant. Like I said, 92.5 career grade that leads all D-tackles in the country, and just the tools that goes along with that. The lower weight he came at the combine is not indicative of what he actually played at. He played at 315 this past year at Michigan, which is obviously good enough for the NFL. And his tape is very good enough for the NFL as well. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.